Hey guys, it's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup. So, this is going to be a bit of a different one. It is going to be an Overwatch League Roundup because it's going to be about the Overwatch League, but this is going to be our evaluation so far of hero pools. So, hero pools were introduced in week 5 of this season of the Overwatch League, after it was announced by the Overwatch devs that they'd be introduced to the base game in competitive to spice things up a little. And it's something a lot of people have called for in some form, hero bans, hero pools, something that some people have called for a long time in Overwatch to make sure that the meta didn't become stale. And we see it in a lot of other competitive games like League of Legends. So, how have the hero pools that have been introduced impacted the league? And I'm talking about the league specifically here. The competitive ladder of Overwatch is a completely different beast. And especially with it having completely different hero pools to the Overwatch League, which the Overwatch League also has the same hero pool as contenders as well, if you didn't know. So that's, you know, a good thing or a bad thing depending on the way you look at it. What the devs have been doing on the live servers in competitive has been much more extreme with the hero pools compared to what the Overwatch League has done and the Overwatch contenders has done. And it'll be also very interesting to see if they filter the Overwatch League / contenders hero pools down to open division, or whether they will be done on the competitive live server rules. I'm expecting them to be done with the rules of the esport, so contenders and league, which is 2 DPS are banned, 1 tank is banned, and 1 support is banned. The competitive ladder doesn't always follow this rule, hence this week it is 1-1-1. Last week it was 4 DPS that were banned, I believe, with 1 tank and 1 support. We've seen 2 tanks banned, 1 DPS, 1 support. We've seen 2 supports banned. It's been all over the place. But in the league and in contenders, we have entirely just seen 2 DPS, 1 support and 1 tank. Mainly because there are a lot more DPS heroes than there are tank and supports. But in week 5, this is where the hero pools came in. And before this, we knew what most of the teams were going to run. We were looking at Reaper, we were looking at May, we were looking at McCree, and a lot of the time it was D.Va, Reinhardt with an Anna, and normally a Lucio or somewhere along that line. We weren't seeing much Zen, we weren't seeing much of anything else, to be quite honest with you. So, we were in a meta. Now, week 5 comes and rolls along, and all of a sudden, we have McCree, Widowmaker, Reinhardt, and Moira banned. Now, the biggest problems here were the fact that Reinhardt was banned, so that completely, you know, took a sledgehammer, pardon the pun, to the tank lines, because most people were running Reinhardt D.Va. And then we had McCree banned, but on top of this, his substitute, which would be Widowmaker, was also banned. So this really screwed around with the roles of the hit scan. So what we saw teams do in week 5 to basically cope with this is either go back to a more Orisa Sigma sort of comp, or some teams were running dive, which was very successful for some. And what happened with the hit scan DPS? Well, we saw a ton of Soldier 76 and we actually saw a bit of Ashe as well. It was just a case of, well, we need hit scan. We can't play McCree and Widowmaker, who have the lowest times to kill out of the hit scan roster, so we're just going to pick up the heroes that are slightly worse but still get the job done. And this meant that a lot of the time Pharah was kept out of the question. So this is kind of an expected response. Moira, she didn't have a particularly high pick rate, so hero bans were changed for the past, or the most recent couple of weeks, because previously their chance to be banned was not weighted on their percentage of usage. So Moira snuck in with just 10% of usage and she got banned for that week, and it really didn't make much difference to what went on. So that's a good change that we've seen the Overwatch League make. But that really did shake things up, and it meant we saw a lot more dive, and this meant that we did have a long break between week 5 and week 8 because obviously the coronavirus situation, but in week 8 we saw Sombra, Soldier 76, Winston and Lucio banned. So this meant that we gravitated a lot away from dive. I say a lot, mostly away from dive. People picked the Reinhardt back up again, or went to the Orisa Sigma sort of compositions. Some teams, especially the Chinese teams, did decide to pick up the Wrecking Ball and put him in the Winston role alongside D.Va and have that dive continue, obviously without the Lucio, but we did actually see, especially from the Chinese teams, a compelling amount of real OG dive, apart from the Winston, which was comprised of a Tracer and a Genji, which was very, very interesting, but obviously that McCree was a big factor and May still hadn't been banned, so teams could play this. San Francisco Shock attempted this. They were able to play their more meta comp, you might say, but the lack of a Lucio meant that these teams often struggled to get into the fight, and it meant that there were some fairly erroneous results. San Francisco Shock had 2 matches that weekend and lost both of them. So it was a surprise, but there was a flip side to this. The 2 DPS bans, Sombra and Soldier 76, really had no impact whatsoever. If Soldier 76 hadn't have been banned, he still wouldn't have been played, because McCree and Widowmaker were back in the hero pool and available for selection, and so Soldier 76 just wouldn't have been looked at. Sombra, in some cases, would have been used, but she didn't have a very high play rate anyway, so it wasn't a massive loss to the teams in the league. But then you move on to the most recent of weeks, and in week 9, we have seen McCree banned, so he is the first hero to have 2 bans in the Overwatch League. Finally, we got May banned, who has been very dominant this year. Wrecking Ball was banned, who saw a lot of playtime in week 8. And Brigitte also saw a lot of playtime in week 8. The reason Brigitte saw a lot of playtime in week 8 is because she has a very varied kit, just like Lucio. And one of Lucio's biggest jobs within the comp he's played in is to peel for his supports, sometimes his DPS as well, and protect them from any incoming dive or incoming, well, even if a Reaper teleported into your back line, to protect him from that with his boop. Brigitte can do exactly the same thing. Sometimes she's more effective depending on the hero she's up against, but with the flail, with the whip shot, with the stun, she's very able to protect her back line. And so, Brigitte very often will be used instead of a Lucio if Lucio can't be played or if it's more ideal. Obviously, with Lucio banned in week 8, teams just decided to pick up a lot of the Brigitte a lot of the time to make sure they had that protection on their back line, and it made a lot of sense. So, this was a very interesting week, with McCree and May being banned. They were the 2 meta DPS at the start of the year, and still are very strong, so this was a real shake-up for some teams. It meant that we could see a bit more of the Widowmaker, and actually what came out was a surprise. Now, you know, in all transparency, the week hasn't actually ended for me. We've only been through half the fixtures this week so far. When I'm recording this, by the time you'll be hearing this, we would have been through most of them apart from 2-ish. Maybe, no, actually we would have been through all of them. So, it's, you know, early days, but what we've seen a lot of is double shotgun comp, which is something we haven't seen before. If you don't know what double shotgun comp is, it's Reaper Torbjorn. That has really stood out to me this weekend. Some teams have made it work, some teams haven't. Washington Justice played it a lot. It didn't work for them against the Toronto Defiant. The Gladiators played it against the Dallas Fuel and it was very successful. And it's kind of been a give or take, but it hasn't been the dominant thing, double shotgun. Torbjorn has seen probably the most amount of gameplay this weekend than he has ever seen before in the Overwatch League. And that is a fantastic testament to the effectiveness of hero pools. Now, obviously, we have seen some other comps. Reaper Doomfist has also been pretty popular as well, with a lot less punishment for that Doomfist, with May and McCree being out of the meta, as well as Brigitte as well. So there's a lot more opportunity to get value from a Doomfist. We've also seen a bit of Tracer. Sombra has made her way back slightly, especially with the Chinese teams. So this week has really shown the power of what hero pools can do, I think. Because, yes, we've seen some interesting heroes come back, like Soldier 76 was absolutely dead in the water before he was played a lot a couple of weeks ago. But this week we have seen Torbjorn, and we have seen a really good amount of Torbjorn. And Torbjorn is just someone you do not see at the top level of Overwatch unless it's a really, really unique comp. So I think this week has really showed us how powerful and how great hero pools have been for the top level of Overwatch. To see top level Torbjorn play is, wow, it's just something to behold. Go and watch Rascal's Torbjorn for the San Francisco Shock. It's just something to behold to see Torbjorns popping off. It's really, really great. So I think, all in all, to round this video out, hero pools at the Overwatch League level, contenders level such and such, have been an enormous success. And contenders is really changing up as well in most regions apart from the EU. British Hurricane seem to have a grasp on those hero pools in the EU. But in South America, in North America, Korea, China, we've seen a lot of varied stuff going on because of hero pools. Runaway struggling in the first week of contenders Korea. We've seen, and they say, run through contenders South America in the first week and then kind of fall flat in week 2. So it's been really interesting to see what has been happening across the globe, not just in the Overwatch League, but in Overwatch contenders as well. Hero pools, in my opinion, at the esports level of Overwatch have been a massive success. And I can't wait to see what happens in the future. Let's just hope we don't get Torbjorn banned in week 10 of the Overwatch League. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.